Fifth graders, Miss Finn coming back at you here. Myself and Megan Sweeney were going through some of the Khan Academy things together, and I realized that some of the things still may be tricky, so I'm going to teach you two more things about division, and this will help you on Khan Academy quiz number 2. So I would suggest before you take that quiz, I would watch this video here. And yes, math can be confusing, and this is obviously much easier if we are in a classroom. So what I'm going to do is try my best. I know you have the Khan Academy videos, but even sometimes I think it's confusing, so hopefully these will help you out too. So in the other 3 videos that you have watched today, one of them talked about dividing with decimals and that you just bring the decimal place up. You don't even move it, just bring it right up to your answer, and that's your answer. In Khan Academy Quiz 2, the numbers are a little bit different. So sometimes you have decimals on the inside, which we call dividends, the inside of your house. So 0 and 4/10 would be our dividend. This is the problem they gave you in Khan Academy. 0 and 4/10 divided by 5. So I put 0 and 4/10 on the inside, 5 on the outside, because that's how many groups we need. So you're like, okay, great. 5 times 0 is 0. Put a 0 on top. 5 can't go into 4, so I put a 0 there, and my answer is 0. That doesn't make sense. How can my answer be 0? So if you notice, we have 0 and 4/10 and 5. Now, what is something we talked about before we left? You can always add to the end of a decimal, not to a whole number, to the end of a decimal, and it won't change its value. Hopefully you said zeros. Remember, in decimals, you can add zeros to the end, and it won't change the value of your number. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to add 1 0 and see if that works. So 5 can't go into 0, so I put a 0 there. 5 still can't go into 4, so I put a 0 there. But can 5 go into 40? Yes, it can. How many times? Count by 5s, hopefully. You got to 8. I'm going to put the 8 above. 8 times 5 is 40. We subtract and get 0. Same thing as before. Bring your decimal right on up. So 0 and our original 4/10 divided by 5 gives me 0 and 8/100. So if you can't, and I just put a nice pretty mark on there, if you can't do this where 0 was less than 5 and 4 was less than 5, add a 0 to the end and see where that gets you. So that's if there's a decimal inside the house. Now we're going to look at decimals on the outside, which we call divisors. So in this problem, 5 is our divisor, 0 and 4/10 is our dividend. In this problem, we're going to set up, you have 6 divided by 0.4. So 6 goes on the inside, 0.4 goes on the outside, 0 and 4/10 divisor, 6 dividend. Now you're looking and you're like, how many times can 4 go into 6? Well, 0, but 6 divided by 0 and 4/10 isn't 0. So our brain kind of red flags, but we get stuck. So what you're going to do is, and this brings it back, see if you remember the saying, it brings it back to fractions. So when you have a decimal on the outside, wherever the decimal point is, you're going to move it until you get a whole number. So in this case, we get to move the decimal 1 place because then 4/10 would become 4. And then just like fractions, to make equivalent fractions, what you do to one, you have to do to the other. Good job. So we moved the decimal 1 place to the 4 to make it a whole number. Now we're going to do the same to the 6. Well, you're like, there's no decimal in 6. Yes, there is, right? That invisible decimal. So 6 is the same thing as 0, 6 and 0/100. But now we move the decimal once here. You're going to move it once in 6. So now 6 is going to become 6D. We're going to put 6D in our box. Now, can you divide 4 into 60? You betcha. How many times can 4 go into 6? It can go in there twice. No, sorry, once, which would be 4. 1 times 4 is 4. 6 minus 4 is 2. Bring it down. 4 can go into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20 with no remainder. So 6 divided by 0.4 equals 15. So if there's a decimal on the inside, you can add a 0 to the end if your numbers are a little different, if one can't go into the other. If there's a decimal on the outside or your divisor, move the decimal that many places. Now, if you had 0.41 divided by 7, so how many places would you have to move this decimal to make it a whole number? You'd have to move it twice. So wherever the decimal is, in order to get a whole number, you move it twice. So what I do to one side, just like fractions, I have to do to the other. So if this was my original number, I moved it twice here, so I'm gonna move it twice here, and then you can solve how many times does 41 go into 700. Hopefully that helps with the confusion. Of course, if you have any more questions, you know how to contact me. Thanks, 5th grade.